Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. My name is Dr. Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And he's my super awesome big brother.
And it's still my favorite role.
Cheers to you.
Cheers to you, my brother.
And to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, yes. Friday night, our night to talk about sex. So appreciate you coming by.
Every day should be Sex Talk Day, right? There's so much to talk about and we're really not doing well. So we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate having this forum to promote more sex talk, more comfortable, frank, matter-of-fact, straight-up sex talk, because we're still too squirrely with it.
We are.
Right? Again,
We are.
as we often say, the most universal thing that humanity can claim everyone shares in common is the number one most embarrassing, awkward thing that people feel like they can't talk about.
That's right. And as we've said before, the source of our greatest pleasure is for too many people the source of their greatest pain. And it's just not right. So,
And unfortunately, another kind of regular standing complaint is that squirreliness has, the mental health professions are not immune from it.
Right.
And the vast majority of psychotherapists who deal with the deepest, most personal, sometimes painful, secret areas of people's lives, as a whole, as a group, are across the board uncomfortable or project too much discomfort onto their patients and feel like they can't bring it up. They can't talk about sex.
Right. And part of that reality is so many psychotherapists, mental health professionals, and medical professionals are just not trained.
Right.
They get no education, they get no training in any of this stuff. And unfortunately, I think there's that pervasive attitude among many professionals, as there is among many people. That the idea that, well, I've done it before, so I know all about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Our sexuality education in the United States is just as squirrely, just as, well, non-existent in most places.
Yeah, that's the case.
We're still hanging on to this 20th century nonsense of abstinence from any sexual activity until marriage.
Right.
And, you know, it's just, it's lost. So we've come down to now at this point in time in the 21st century that, well, the de facto sexuality educator of our kids has become porn. And the internet is really just about the main source for most people's information.
It is. And before we say too many negative things about that, since you all are watching us on the internet,
that's right.
Please go ahead, if you would, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification if, again, you want to continue these conversations about healthy and positive sexuality. And let's make the internet a good place to get information
Which it is,
about sex.
right?
There are good places on the internet.
I'm glad you cut me off there because, yes, especially people who just don't have access or who want to educate their kids and their schools don't want to touch that hot potato. Yes, there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful places from our dear old friend Judith Steinhardt, who started one of the very first and the earliest days of the internet, the Go Ask Alice website, when she was at Columbia University. Scarlet Teen, is a great source. Our friend Ellen Bernard in Madison has that sexualityresources.com. So yeah, absolutely. When that was one of the real revolutions of the internet, is just the access to information. But unfortunately, what goes along with that is that it's still very much a wild, wild west.
Right.
And it's incumbent upon the user, the surfer, to be able to discern.
That's right.
How to find good, solid, helpful information and avoid the fluff or the kind of pseudo expertise, as you said, and we'll talk with our guest in just a moment about. just because you like sex or have had sex or feel like you're more comfortable than most talking about sex doesn't mean you're a sexuality educator or a sex therapist.
Right.
These are, trained, credentialed professions.
They're skills that have to be obtained and developed and honed,
Right.
Like anything else. And again, we often use in sex ed, we often use that analogy of, well, I really like people, I really like sex, I really care about people having good sex, so that's all I need to be an educator. Now, would you take your car to a mechanic who didn't have any training, who never got educated about engines, but they care about cars and they really want people to drive good, safe cars? That's not enough.
No, it's not enough.
It's just not enough.
Yeah.
Right? So unfortunately, in this particular area, that's kind of what we've been forced. That's the corner we've been forced into. And we've said that, we've talked about some of these things before with sex ed. I have looked directly into the camera and I have blamed many of you parents, many of you people who refuse to allow sex ed to be in the schools, refuse to allow the opportunity for good information and education to be taught. So as a result of all of that, we are left with, as you said, this de facto sex educator that is not only porn, but it's every person's blog, it's every person's website, it's all the TikTok and Twitter and all the social media stuff. Yeah. And while there is a lot of good stuff out there, I think it's harder to find than the crap.
Yeah.
Right? And how much crap are people willing to wade through in order to get to the quality stuff, as opposed to just saying, you know what, this is the crap I got to deal with. Right? And just being in it, settling for it, not feeling so overwhelmed. And I think this has become a problem.
Yes. Right. So we have the good fortune of having our favorite returning guest, Lori Shapiro, joining us. So,
indeed. So, again, why don't we just go right to it?
And we are back, as promised, with our returning champion, your favorite guest, Lori Shapiro, sex therapist extraordinaire from Bethesda, Maryland area, the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, little quad up there. So nice to see you. So great to have you back.
Great to see you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me back. This is like one of the highlights of my professional career, is spending time with my two favorite mentors who helped me become the extraordinaire that I am. I couldn't have done it without you.
Nice.
You know how much of a pleasure it is for us.
You're too kind.
Truly.
And we're
it's mutual. It's always mutual.
Well past that and peers now.
That's right.
Just throws to no
yes.
end.
Yes.
It's just we could talk about anything. We don't talk often enough, and it's good to have you back. And I'm glad to talk about tonight's topic, because it's part of the world we're living in now. Everything is online, and everybody's an expert. Everybody has a podcast, and their sister too. And so we wanted to just spend a little time talking about, I guess, the pros and cons of online sex ed and sex advice and sex therapy, and what's 21st century, how the internet is affecting our work as sex therapists.
Absolutely. It's amazing how things have changed because of COVID, both positive and negative. So I think that, helping people to continue to understand, the difference between education, advice, and true treatment, because those are three very different things.
Indeed. And I think that's especially important in our field, because sex tends to be one of those things that people often think that if they've done it, they're experts, right? And we see this in all forms of things, whether it's people dealing with abuse. Oh, well, I was abused, so let me tell you what to do.
Right. And we tend to, well, I like to think I don't. Actually, I know I don't. I do not put myself in the space of another person. My job is to be a blank slate to hear what their experiences are, and then use the tools that I learned through education, training, clinical supervision, licensure, continuing education, which never ends, and I continue to use that to help keep myself a blank slate to help people where they are, not where I've been or what I've done or what I do. And that's especially important, in my opinion, in all of the alternate lifestyles, and as well as the LGBTQIA, so on and so on and so on, in those populations, because you may read a book or take a class and think that you know everything, but you don't. You don't know that person's experience.
Right.
So I think that's really important as a mental health professional who's also, licensed and certified and all those other things, to continue to be on top of understanding that it doesn't matter what I've done or not done in my life. It's not about me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me just, I will definitely want to piggyback on that point, but let me just back you up a couple of seconds and ask you, what is, in your opinion, that distinction between, education and these little like tidbits and tips and podcasty kind of, that kind
Advice.
of, yeah.
I would say that's it. Yeah, it's the difference between somebody giving you advice and telling you what to do based on whatever their topic is of the day, because they're not talking to anyone specific. They're not in a room with a person talking about anything specific. It's broad generalizations. And then there's advice given that's not specific to you. Whereas when you're in a room with a mental health professional via online, on the phone, or in person, after you've signed an actual consent for treatment, which is the law, versus somebody going online and just basically giving knowledge and education, like our wonderful friend, Dr. Joe Court. He's out there giving people so much information, but he's not saying, you need to do this and you need to do that. No, he says, here's a topic that we need to be talking about. And if you feel like you need help with it, go to a licensed mental health professional and a sex therapist and get help with it. So I think that's the difference. Somebody telling you what you specifically should do, even though they don't see you, they don't know you, and they're telling you what to do, versus just saying, hey, let's do some psychoeducation. Let's talk about terms and phrases and, different things and learn about them. And I think that's where things get sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how do people, especially online, how do people find sexperts? Right?
Well,
Yeah,
there's,
I agree. It's like so incredibly brave. I could not, I don't want that kind of exposure, even doing this
Right.
thing.
Right. Well, I would say one way is going to the ASECT website, AASECT, and you can go through the website, see, you can see, right, .org, thank you. You can see that I'm licensed in, like DC, Virginia, Maryland, and Florida. So you can see what my credentials are, where I went to school, what I know and what I don't. There's a picture of me. There are links to hearing me speak and talk, including on your show, and then going from there. So you've got to be able to find it. Or asking other therapists, who do you know in the area that is a licensed professional, or even Psychology Today. Although my one negative with Psychology Today is a lot of therapists will check off every box.
Right.
Basically, I do everything. And if you've ever looked at my Psychology Today, I do not check off every box. I'm like, this is what I do. This is my framework. And that's it. And also, the therapist should be willing to talk to you before an appointment. Offer a 15-minute video conference so that you can see them and see if there's a connection with them, see if you feel comfortable with them. Check their license. You can go on the board where they're licensed. Make sure that they are what they say they are, that they haven't had any, disciplinary actions, and read their reviews. I mean, I think in the beginning, when the reviews became a thing, like Google and Yelp, I was very afraid of it. I really was. I have to admit, I'm a lady of a certain age, and those things were not, at all available. And I was very worried when those things started coming out, but thank God all of my reviews are good. But,
Not
reading
surprising.
people's reviews and making sure that there's some legitimacy to what they're telling you and what their claims are.
Yeah. Now, and if I can, just on that, because this is a point that I do have concern with about all of this stuff. It's been shown time and time again that when you look at Google reviews, you look at Yelp reviews, that's how some people make a living. People are paid to write all of these positive reviews, none of them by you. Let me be very clear about that.
No, and that's fine. But I also don't have 500 reviews. I've got like
Right.
15. And that's the other thing. You see somebody with 2,000 reviews or something ridiculous that they haven't seen 2,000 patients in the last 5 years. You look at people who have like reviews that seem legitimate, not like, oh, they're the best person in the world. Like some of my reviews I love say things like, she was really tough on me and I was surprised, that she would really call me on my BS. And so like reading what people are actually saying and looking at the reasonable, it's not like on Amazon when you're trying to buy, a phone charger and there's 8,000 reviews. So it needs to be something reasonable.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but let me, another point you brought up, and maybe veering into a little more sexist, maybe less PC subject, but it's a reality, I think, especially for sex therapists. People often shop by those photos and look for a therapist. That you are far, far, far more likely to get creeps than I ever will. Right? It's just
I have been very fortunate over the years to really not get creeps. And I think that through good supervision by my mentors, Ricky, I have learned one of the things that's important is also it's the people you don't take as much as the people you do. So when you're talking to people and listening to what they say, some people are a little creepy, but that doesn't mean they're a creep. So if you're going in with an open mind and you keep your professionalism, you can kind of see what's real and what's not, So
but I'm easing into the point of
no, about appearance and looks, right?
who
Yes.
like are seemingly intentionally over sexualizing themselves in this online world.
Absolutely.
What effect that has on their practice, on kind of the collective, all of us. And
well, being an attractive female, it's funny because I was just saying the other day, my profile for Well Marriage Center, that picture is like 5 years old. And so, my hair is a lot longer. And so and now they've added some video of me talking and you can see like the difference. But a lot of people do say to me, we picked you not just because of what you said, but also you looked a way that we felt like we could connect with you, which meant, I have a lot of facial symmetry, I have an attractive face, but that's not the most important part. And so it's being careful if somebody's out there over sexualizing themselves, asking what is their motivation. And again, I think it goes back to their credentialing and looking at, you could be very sexy and very beautiful and also be very talented or not. So, picking people by their credentials and not the way that they look, because we all know that unattractive people have sex too, which of course, that I don't know how much I've been doing a lot of reading and looking into like the whole incel movement. I'm not sure. I've been doing a lot of reading about that. And if anybody who's watching this, if you don't know about the incel movement, it's a big thing where people feel like because of whatever reason, their looks, their race, their height, their attractiveness or lack thereof, they are not entitled to the same level of status as somebody who's better looking, who can get a better looking partner to elevate their status in society. And that's a big thing. And that's a problem for a lot of people. I can't make you taller. I can't make your penis any bigger. I can't make you any more lovable. But, everybody does have the right.
Which, we had the same wicked 12-year-old thought at the same time that we're quite sure you can make penises bigger.
Yeah.
But if anyone doesn't know, I don't want to get silly with an important subject. Anyone who doesn't know, incel is kind of a contraction for involuntary celibates, and this is kind of a scary thing.
It is.
There's a very, very close parallel. Very often, they're white, right-leaning men,
And they're very angry, and they're
yeah,
very
they
and
do. I was gonna say,
and there's been violence involved, and
a lot of this kind of Proud Boys mentality.
That's
and,
right.
and
That's right. And
very
you know,
misogynistic against women. They blame women for
That's
their
right.
not getting laid.
and a lot of them are very violent in their misogyny.
right. But it's not just about getting laid for them. It's about getting laid by the
They think they
6
deserve
foot
to
long
get laid.
bombshell.
Right.
You know, so sex workers are not an option for them, or people who are not a 10 or not. They want to be. They think they're entitled to be with a girl who otherwise may not find them attractive, and they think that there's a level of unfairness. But also there are women of color who fall into some of that feeling of not being able to attract a mate that feels right for them, because maybe they're a bigger woman of color and maybe they are not getting the attention maybe that they would want, and they don't feel that that's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
not everybody is a misogynist who feels that there's a book out now, or a podcast out that I just was listening to, and it's The Right of Sex, or The Right to Sex.
Like 2 sex, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fascinating and interesting. There's a book that goes with it, and I was listening to the podcast, and the author, whose name escapes me at the moment, you know, she's talking about some of the frustrations in society about that, which I see in my clientele right now. My single clients who've been, you know, shut-ins now almost for 2 years, they're like, how do I meet anybody? How do I date? You know, I'm going on the people picking apps, but people don't want to meet me in person because they're afraid of COVID. And so there's a lot of very lonely people, and who are also very frustrated and starved for human contact.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to point out that those aren't really the people who identify as incels.
Correct.
When we're looking at that group of people, and it's a self-identified group of people, you know,
Right.
I really would even look forward to working with a lot of those people that you're describing, because there's a lot that you can work with. But these incels, you know, I'm just going to say that they are perfect examples of how some people's personalities are the best form of birth control.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
they're
that goes
not
back to,
willing
like,
to make any adjustments.
right, and that goes back to seeing stuff online. These
Right.
people are online saying all kinds of things that are just, as you said, misogynistic and very
Angry.
leaning into a place that we don't necessarily want to go. And so people are hearing this and going, yeah, maybe that's what I need, or maybe this is what I need. And they're giving me advice on what I deserve. And again, I say, if you're struggling with these things, the best thing you can do is seek out a licensed mental health professional who can help you work through some of those feelings. That's really the scary part, is that they're not saying, go talk to a licensed mental health professional.
Right. Now, let me throw this out to you on that point. With everything that's out there, right? I think I've heard people say things to this effect, that to go on and look up any of that advice stuff for, you know, whatever lack of training, education, knowledge, experience they may have, but isn't in a lot of ways that just a whole lot less effort than having to search for a real and quality professional. And
Absolutely.
Is there not this element, because it's can be so overwhelming to go online and look for something, that there's a tendency to just pick what seems to be closest to, it sounds like, okay, it looks like it, sounds like it's close enough. Hey, they have a lot of people watching them, so I guess they're good.
Right. And the other frustration is that right now mental health professionals are so overwhelmed. I hear people tell me all the time, I called 14 therapists. You're the only one who called me back. I call everybody back. Even if I have no space or the minimum amount of space available, I call everybody back. Because if you've taken the time to find me, I'm going to call you. And I think that becomes a big frustration, is that some of the mental health professionals who are out there don't have the ability or the time or whatever the case may be. So yeah, on top of that, they're frustrated that they couldn't find someone or nobody responded to them. And so then they feel really lost. And so here's this person on TikTok telling them, here, do this and do that and do this and do that. And they're like, oh, and then come over to my fans only page, and pay me some money and, I'll mail you my panties kind of thing. Like, that makes no sense. But, you get drawn in because you feel like, well, there's 5 million people who've seen this particular video, so it must have some sort of traction to it, when that's not the case.
Yeah.
We're very much in the society of, it's like the difference between, like, with Dr. Rachel Needle, she does her on her Instagram, she does Sex Tip Saturday, which I love. It's great. And, she's somebody that I truly respect and love and adore and work with all the time. And she doesn't say, this is what you have to do. She's like, hey, here's an idea, think about this and think about the possibility of how this can be, a great thought for you and your partner. But again, this is somebody who's recognized and been recognized in a million different ways. It would take us all day to count how many ways she's been recognized. But, but she's out there saying, hey, or here's a great idea, but also here's how you can reach me and my professionality and how you can get connected to help. So, and I think that's a big part of it.
Do you think, given a lot of what's been going on politically the last couple of years, that there is sort of a negative pale that's been cast over professionals? So people might be more inclined to say, well, this person has common sense, and I prefer that over credentials. Yes,
I do. And I think that, because the country is so politically divided in so many ways, if that person doesn't identify or outwardly tell you they identify with your beliefs or your morals or your values, then you can't understand them because you're in a different court. I mean, I tend politically to always be Switzerland. That's always my standpoint. But I see couples all the time coming in because they have different political views and they just can't reconcile that. I mean, think about it. Like, we used to talk about every year around Thanksgiving, don't talk politics at the dinner table because people are in very different places. We haven't in the last couple of years because who the hell's going to dinner, because of COVID. But yes, I do. And I think that it's like, if this person says they identify with my belief, my political belief, then clearly they know what I need to do and what I know because they understand me and what's important to me. And I think that's a huge thing. And that's the frightening part, is that, and I tell people all the time, you wouldn't go to the dentist if you had a brain tumor, it makes no sense. You want to find the best brain tumor specialist to help you.
Yeah.
So just because you've had sex doesn't mean that you are a sex therapist. Just because you've had a lot of sex doesn't,
or if you like talking about sex.
Right, exactly. We've dealt with that in sex ed for a long time. All these people that are in adolescent sexual health and doing all this teen pregnancy prevention, they have no education, no substance, no training,
but
no
they care about kids.
They care. Right. And
what's frightening is that all these years later, that's still going on.
That's right.
It's still going on. I mean, I have high school and college age children, in spite of my very youthful appearance, of course. But when they come home, my daughter, my youngest daughter, she's almost 16. She's a sophomore in high school. And actually, it's very exciting. She's taking an LGBTQ sensitivity course, which is awesome, although she already had all that under control. And, being in a class with people who have different pronouns, who are they, them, and she, her, and he, him, and pan, and bi, and all these other things. And the teacher's super cool and hip. She really gets it. She really understands. She really encourages it. And actually Jamie offered me up to come in and, talk in her class, which I said, of course I would do. People are like, that's so cool. Your mom's, when she was in kindergarten, it was not so cool that her mom was a sex therapist, but now in high school, it's the coolest thing ever. but at least they're moving in that direction. That there's, I don't know about other counties, but here in Montgomery County, they are offering that course in high school, which I think is phenomenal. But again, there's still no talk about sexual pleasure. There's still no mention. I mean, you think about the original version of Grey's Anatomy, the most important medical book for doctors, no mention of the clitoris at all. They had put it in at one point and then took it out again.
Yeah.
It's like sexual pleasure just doesn't seem to be important, you know, and it's like, well, then
for women, sexual/reproductive starts with the S, ends with the E. It's all one word.
Exactly.
And it always leans
Mhm.
to reproductive. Nobody's
Right.
comfortable saying we all have our sexual parts on the outside. Men,
Right.
women, everybody.
Well, remember, we were at the ASECT conference in Colorado, and you had that
Larry's
3D
clitoris,
model of
like
the door.
clitoris.
We like passed it around. We passed it around the restaurant. Do you know
Everybody
what this
touched
is?
my clitoris.
And nobody
Knew what it
identified.
was. Nobody knew what it was. And I do that all the time with clients. I'm like, do you know what this is? They're like, no. Like, and again, you know, I love the statistics when they talk about 70 to 80% of women do not orgasm during penetrative sex. I think that's bullshit. I think it is so much higher. I think women are so afraid to admit that they cannot have it because the porn culture, and I have no issue with porn. You can watch porn all day long. I couldn't care less as long as, you know, it's being used appropriately. But like the porn culture didn't just teach boys about what girls are supposed to do. Girls watch it too. And they're like, oh, wait, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And it just, again, it's all that stuff, and we're just not giving people the education they need. And so social media is both a positive and a negative with respect to that, because there are really great people out there who are really offering good stuff, but you've got to be careful of the people who don't know what they're talking about and who really aren't qualified to be giving you any advice.
Indeed. And unfortunately, there's a lot more of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A whole lot more of them. You know,
Yes.
yeah, we get that, you know, that sort of Nancy Grace syndrome.
Oh,
Yes.
you mean like if something happened to me, that makes me an expert in it, so I could tell you how to live your life.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That's what it's
or-
filled with.
If it were only that easy,
Yeah.
if it were only that easy, I'd be president right now. So I'm just saying, you know, I'd take over and run the world. So
Indeed.
yeah.
if it were only that easy, but unfortunately, you know, there are so many people who right now have been so isolated, they don't know whether to, you know, wind their ass or scratch their watch. I mean, you know, it's a very difficult time.
That's adorable.
Which is why, you know, like I said, I think a lot of mental health professionals who are well educated, very, you know, on top of their A game, there's a lot of burnout going on right now because I work 6 days a week as it is. I mean, that's a lot of people to see, but it's like, how do you tell people who are drowning that you can't throw them a life raft?
Mm.
So I think it's really important to, you know, do your research, read people, don't just look at a picture and pick a therapist, read what they say. And if they say they do everything, they're full of crap. They don't do everything. Find people who are saying, this is my specialty. This is what I do.
Best.
And then if they won't talk to you, if they won't have a conversation with you, either on the phone or a quick video call, move on. Because somebody who really wants to work with you is going to give you that time to make sure it's a good fit.
Yeah. Wow.
And a lot of people will talk about, like in private practice, you know, the people, I've been doing this for 30 years, a long time. And so I don't work with insurance. I'm self-pay. And so a lot of people discuss the frustration that they have to pay out of pocket and not work with the insurance companies, but the insurance companies don't make it easy for people to work with them. So, you know, there's pluses and minuses to everything. And there's lots of great therapists who take insurance. There's tons of them.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's about finding the right fit.
Maybe someday the insurance companies will recognize that sex is a quality of life issue and they will reimburse
Right. And sex therapy is a
Therapists.
legitimate modality.
for
Even couples therapy, 90% of insurance companies, they're like, we don't cover couples therapy, but yet they'll cover what's called family therapy. And a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, well, we called our insurance company and they don't cover couples therapy. I'm like, but they cover family therapy. And this also qualifies as family therapy. And so the insurance company is only doing things based on numbers and codes and all that other stuff. And all of these are quality of life issues and are super duper important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah.
So I think at that point, on that note,
We have to say goodbye for the time being. We'll have you back real soon. You know that.
I'm always happy to come and talk with you guys. I love you guys to death. And, all of your viewers and all of the people who listen to you love you guys because you really do. You bring in the best of the best and give people as much information as you can. And you're keeping something really important moving forward. And we need to continue to do that in order to, we need to all stand together and learn to, I don't love the term, but we need to help people become woke on every level. And that's important.
Indeed. So thank you so much.
Au revoir. Mwah. And you can find me at either wellmarriagecenter.com or Lori Shapiro sextherapist.com. I'm also on the ASECT website, so I'm easy to find. And if you can't find a therapist and I'm not licensed in your state, I will help you find one.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Once more, Lori Shapiro from Bethesda, Maryland. Love you.
Love you too. Ciao.
Talk soon. You know what? I think more than anybody else.
Here's to you, Lori.
Yes,
we
Lori,
love
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
really
joining us. Always enjoy our discussions.
Mm-hmm. And again, there's a reason you're the returning champion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there's some really good points. And I'm glad that she did mention some things that we need to keep in mind when we are looking for a sexuality or sexual health professional. Credentials are important. I don't think we can say that enough. Credentials are important.
And people seeking therapy, especially for, serious life impacting issues, relationship impacting issues, it would be wise to do a little bit of due diligence and make sure you're not giving your hard-earned money to some hack, right? People sometimes, I guess the most or one of the most popular or strongest search engine optimization is Psychology Today, and it's become one of the most common places people go to look for a therapist. And as we discussed with Lori, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
The only other profession I could think of is real estate agents who, use their face to market. And it's a little weird that psychologists, as you pointed out, the line's so blurred between someone's personal online social media life. And a lot of therapists, they have a wall, this is my personal Facebook page that only my friends and family can access. And I have a professional page for my practice that the general public can access. But it's a fine line sometimes.
There really is. And especially when we have those sex therapists who are legitimately credentialed, who may be very talented, who have the experience, yet they're presenting themselves in that very sexualized way.
Right.
And a lot of people in our field, we don't speak for our field right now. There's a lot of different perspectives on this. There are many people, sex therapists, sex educators, that say, well, you know what, this is what we do. Why not celebrate it? Let people know we're very comfortable with it. We put it out there. But then there's that other side of the ethical presentation. That, we need to keep some lines. That there's one thing to be comfortable with your sexuality. There's one thing to help people be comfortable with sexuality. But it's another thing to put yourself out there in a way that your clients and potential clients may be fueling sexual fantasies. They may be sexualizing you, which I think if a client or a patient is really sexualizing their therapist, it does detract from the therapy.
Yeah.
Right? Because it makes the therapist too much of a part of it.
Right. As I said, when you and I were talking earlier in the week, we were talking about this, and you know, the idea that whether or not I have sex, how I have sex, and with whom I have sex are all completely irrelevant
Right.
to someone coming to me for my expertise as a sex therapist.
Exactly.
Right. And it's in fact, I believe it gets in the way of the therapy.
It does.
If my patients are, there's no way to sound this without like, I'm not trying to sound like my patients are all fantasizing about me, but that should not be part of the equation.
Right.
Right? There should never be, well, this is what I've done, so trust me, it was pretty awesome, you should do it too.
Right.
No, the suggestions made by sex therapists are for the best therapeutic goals of their patients. And it isn't like, as you said, that kind of, I hate to single her out, but that Nancy Grace thing. I don't know what happened to her.
But she's still around.
She disappeared from TV.
No, she's still around.
Yeah. That, as we said, you know, if something happened to me, that's enough experience that I'm an expert in it and I'll tell you what to do.
Right. Right.
That's
you
not
know,
good therapy.
That conversation we
That's
had.
advice. And there's a reason why advice is
That's
free.
right. That's right.
Because you get what you pay for.
And I want to also share something that you said in that previous conversation we had as well, because I think it was also such a great point that not only is my sexual behavior completely irrelevant in a therapeutic context, but the point that you also made, I think is really worth repeating, that what may or may not be between my legs is also completely irrelevant.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
Completely irrelevant. What I do with what may or may not be between my legs is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right? So I think this whole idea, even therapy, and I know I'm going to kind of get a little bit of this, you know, by saying this, but even putting out there that, you know, hey, I'm a therapist, this is what I do, and these are my pronouns. It's irrelevant. Right? It's completely irrelevant to anything that has to do with the treatment this client is getting.
Right. The therapist needs to be aware of the patient's chosen pronouns, but is it important for, well, yeah, I guess it's, you know, part of that, the self of the therapist and you know, marketing, much as most therapists would probably want to deny it. They don't teach us a lot about the business of being a therapist.
That's right.
Right? You just sort of belched out of graduate school and said, go figure it out. But yeah, it's a business and we have to sell ourselves. But it's odd in this arena that a lot of people are selling themselves in, no way to say this without sounding really judgy, but in really overtly and overly sexualized ways.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
so
agree
I
with
just
that.
had a student ask me this week, well, not ask, but comment that it's hard to take advice from someone who's in a room that's lit up like a bordello, and you know they're seductively lying on a leopard skin rug. And
the therapist is in full BDSM, you know, kind of attire, and you know.
Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So again, I'm glad we had that conversation with Lori.
Yeah.
Again, some really good points. Please take the extra step or two if you really are looking for a sexuality or sexual health professional.
Right.
Find one that really is a professional in more than the fact that they get paid for it.
Right. Look for that word certified. It is important. And I know, you know, things like ASECT doesn't really mean much to the general public, but I would like to believe that people are just looking through lists of therapists, and this one says they're a sex therapist, and that one says they're a certified sex therapist, that would mean something, even if they're not quite sure what exactly it means. Again, ideally, they would look into that. They would say, what does it mean to be an ASECT certified sex therapist? And then you could find out what goes into earning that credential.
Absolutely.
Not just, I'm into sex, so I'll check the box. And yeah.
Right, exactly. So when they use that word certified, that's a real credential,
Right.
right? You can't just say that. You have to have that. And so I think that's a really good line to be aware of for people. So on that note,
Yes, we will say good tidings to you and best wishes for a happy, restful Thanksgiving.
indeed. And
And,
for our Jewish brethren, follow that with a happy Hanukkah, which is going to be right after Thanksgiving. So again, I thank you again.
Thank
for
you,
a
my
good
Drew.
week. We thank you for joining us this and every Friday for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. See you then.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.